Okay, viewers, I won't call you fans because somebody got upset that I jokingly said hi fans last time. You gotta understand, I'm just sitting here in my living room alone talking to a laptop, so it seems funny for me to say hi fans to a laptop. Yesterday, on Facebook, a guy who shows up at our Zen centers on a regular-ish basis tried to out me and turn folks against me because my nephew writes for a right-wing news slash entertainment website called Liberty Writers News under the name Danny Gold. I defriended him and blocked him on Facebook because I don't want to communicate via Facebook with somebody who does despicable shit to me and my family. Facebook is, of course, not the only way humans communicate. So, blocking and unfriending somebody on Facebook isn't the same as blocking the person from your life, which I haven't done. The fact that this happened at all is really disturbing to me. Really disturbing. Because it means that at least there's a perception on his part and on the part of some of the people who responded to what he said on Facebook that if one is not sufficiently left wing, they are not a good Buddhist teacher or not a good person or whatever. I've already made it abundantly clear more times than I care to that I'm not particularly a fan of Donald Trump, our current president. Voted against him, don't like most of his policies or ideas about things. Uh, but I'm not freaking out about it. I think it's important that we don't freak out about Trump. Because freaking out about Trump is where things start to slide into an area where it becomes very difficult to get out of. Once everybody is in freak out mode, they stop behaving rationally. They stop being able to have conversations with people they don't agree with, and things get very ugly. And that's what worries me most about this political climate. And quite frankly, another thing that worries me is that Donald Trump himself doesn't seem to care to stop this from happening. So I think that's a problem, much more than his policies. What worries me more than any of that policy stuff is his lack of trying to quell some of the craziness, which is, in my mind, one of the jobs of the President of the United States, is to try to quell general craziness. The other thing that concerns me is the conflation of left-wing politics with Buddhism in America. I think this is extremely problematic. I don't think Buddhism and politics mixes very well. They are different areas of human endeavor, and mixing them creates a kind of confusion that is, again, very difficult to get out of. You get stuck in this quagmire of confusion and nobody knows what the hell is going on. So I think it's important to keep our politics out of our Buddhism. Not that Buddhists should not be political. Buddhists can be whatever they want. There's no rules about that. But once you start mixing Buddhism with politics, you get into a very sticky area that it becomes a kind of quagmire that's quite difficult to untangle. So maybe don't tangle them up in the first place. As some of you must surely know, my latest book is a little thing called Don't Be a Jerk. The book contains my paraphrases, my rewritings of a bunch of Dogen's most famous pieces of writing. The title is taken from the title I gave to an essay of his called Shoaku Makusa. The title itself is significant because he says Shoaku Makusa. In Japanese, there are no true plurals. So anytime you use a noun, you could be saying dog or dogs, foot or feet, shoe or shoes. There's no difference grammatically in Japanese. So in order to make something plural, you have to add other words to it. And that's why he says shoaku. Aku means evil, and sho means various. Makusa means don't do. He is telling us not to do various evils rather than not to do evil, because he wants to point out that evil is not a thing that exists before somebody does something evil. Evil is what happens when you do something evil. There's no abstract evil. And this is a very important part of Dogen's philosophy of life. Given what happened on Facebook yesterday and in the world in general lately, I think this don't be a jerk teaching is really important. I think being a jerk is not a partisan thing. I'd like to read some of the passages from here and comment a little on them. I did this on the blog the other day, but doing it here without referring to the blog itself might lend a little depth. Among rightness, wrongness, and it doesn't matterness, there is wrongness. Wrongness is what happens at the very moment you do something wrong. It's not an abstraction that sits around waiting to be done. It's the same with rightness and it doesn't matterness. This was a bit difficult to paraphrase because Dogen gets into some weird grammar here. So rightness and wrongness are easy to translate. It doesn't matterness. I don't remember exactly the Japanese word that he uses here, but it was a phrase that can be understood as something like things that are neither right nor wrong. You know, they're just stuff you do, like taking out the garbage or whatever, you know, just ordinary stuff that doesn't really have any right or wrong content. He goes on, though, and this is where it gets kind of interesting. He says, right and wrong are time, but time is neither right nor wrong. Right and wrong are the Dharma, but the Dharma is neither right nor wrong. He is referring to his concept of being time. So what you do is intimately related with time itself. Time is action and the accumulation of action and how things roll forward in the universe. So right and wrong are time. So when you do a right action, that creates a time of right. And when you do a wrong action, it creates a time of wrong. And everything you do is, as my teacher Gudo Nishijima said, carved into the universe. So that means you can't erase what's done. And that means you ought to be careful what you do because there are no takebacks. Don't be a jerk wasn't a teaching someone intentionally invented. It existed before anyone put it into words. So this idea is really interesting because he's saying that right and wrong are kind of cosmic events, which we don't, we have this very sort of worldview in which we think that human beings are kind of insignificant. That's kind of the developing thing among science. People are kind of happy to think that human actions are kind of insignificant because, it doesn't affect anything but other humans. I think that's a bit wrong. Of course, whether we have a war or not, the sun will keep shining. Whether we destroy ourselves or not, Jupiter will keep revolving, and the planet Nosnibor in the galaxy 538, probably nobody will ever know. Literally, nobody will ever know because the information will never travel that far. And yet, we are ourselves a kind of window on the universe. So the universe looks at itself through us. We are its way of understanding itself. And so in that sense, what happens among human beings and among any sort of beings is significant. When we hear it, this don't be a jerk thing, we hope that we can learn to do the right thing and not be a jerk. This is a pretty big deal. It's on the scale of the whole of time and the entire universe. So, what I just said. The scale of not being a jerk is in the not being part. Just don't do jerk-like things. So, not being a jerk is what we're worried about. So, it's action. Concrete action here and now, rather than this kind of vague, nebulous concept of evil. You can't fight evil, no matter how hard Superman tries. You can only regulate what you do that is right and that is wrong. Jerk-type action has no fixed form. It has no existence until someone does it. If we don't act like jerks, jerk-type actions cannot exist. You can do jerk-type things or you can avoid doing jerk-type things. The moment you know that jerk-type action does not exist outside of your own conduct, that is realization of the truth. He's very serious about the idea that jerk-like actions, wrong actions, evil actions are actual things you do rather than abstractions. Some people think that being a jerk arises out of past causes and conditions, but don't see how they themselves are those causes and conditions. Those guys are pretty sad cases, or as Trump might say, sad. The seeds of Buddhahood also come from causes and conditions. Jerk-type actions neither exist nor don't exist. Evil doesn't exist or not exist. It is either done or not done. So we are past causes and conditions. One way to understand what a human being is an accumulation of past causes and conditions done by the person herself or himself, or the general society that that person is a part of, or the general humanity itself as a larger thing. We are a product of that. And we don't really have much existence outside of that, not as individuals. Our individuality is just a product of that causes and conditions in the past. So it's not that we are a soul who does stuff. We are the stuff we have done. And the accumulation of the stuff we have done allows us to do more stuff as individuals, but what we really are is far more universal than that. And sometimes, if you work on your meditation practice enough, you'll come into contact with that. And coming into contact with that as an individual is kind of a mind-blowing experience, and a lot of people crave it. But it's more a thing that changes your outlook about what to do, rather than something that makes you enlightened in the sense of you will never do anything bad again. You just know what doing bad is, and then you have free choice to decide whether to do that or not. When you finally grasp this point, even the thought, oh hell, I was a jerk back then, is just energy arising from your desire not to be a jerk again. However, to say that this realization is some kind of weird rationale for being a jerk is totally stupid. Now, I don't remember exactly what Japanese phrase I translated when I did that little bit, but I think it's important, and it's what I got out of what Dogen was saying. You can use the fact that you have had some kind of understanding of how the universe works as an excuse to be an asshole. That's the amazing part of this whole thing. There's a kind of mythology out there in the ether that says you have some kind of grand enlightenment experience, and then you are no longer capable of being an asshole. I don't believe that. I know there's a lot of people who tell you that exists, and a lot of those people are very famous, and maybe you're more inclined to believe them than you are to believe me, but For what it's worth, I don't believe it. As for doing the right thing, there are all sorts of right things that can be done, but there has never been any kind of right thing that just sits around waiting for someone to do it. I can't add anything to that. Different people in different places may have different ideas about the right thing to do. It's the same as what constitutes being a jerk. So our ideas about what's right and wrong, and what's actually right and wrong, sometimes intersect and sometimes do not. It's what Sam Harris calls the moral landscape. So there are societal things that people consider right and societal things that people consider wrong, and those are very relativistic, and you can't, it's hard to say this is right and this is wrong. But we have a kind of an intuitive sense within all of us where we can see things that are really wrong. When you hurt somebody, that's a bad thing to do. It's bad for you and it's bad for the person. So you can see this, even though the cultural differences and the linguistic differences kind of obscure it. You can see it, and we need to rely more on a kind of intuitive sense than what we think about in our noggins. Doing the right thing is not the self, nor is it known by the self, nor is it someone else or known by someone else. In the act of knowing, there is self and other. In the act of seeing, there is self and other. But doing the right thing is beyond such distinctions. It's just the right thing doing itself. That's a tricky one. That's where the Buddhist idea of compassion comes in. Compassion is something that you allow to happen rather than deliberately enact. It's tricky and difficult, and this video would be 12 hours long if I tried to go into that, but think about it a little bit and maybe it'll make sense. And here's my favorite line. Even if the whole universe is nothing but a bunch of jerks doing all kinds of jerk-type things, there is still liberation in simply not being a jerk. Here are some standard translations of that line. Even if wrong upon wrong pervade the whole universe, and even if wrongs have swallowed the whole Dharma again and again, there is still salvation and liberation in not committing. That's Nishijima and Cross. Those are my teacher and his student Mike Cross. That's their translation. Here's the Kazuaki Tanahashi translation. Even if unwholesome action fills worlds upon worlds and swallows up all things, refrain from is emancipation, and refrain from is done in italics. He's trying to preserve Dogen's weird grammar. And here is the Soto Zen Text Project's version. Even if evils completely filled however many worlds or completely swallowed however many dharmas, there is liberation in not doing. So even if everybody is being shitty, you don't need to be shitty. That is something I take to heart all the time. Even if everybody's being a jerk, I'm going to try to be the one who's not being a jerk. This may end up getting me discredited in some people's eyes or unliked, unloved. It doesn't matter. There's a higher principle involved, and I just kind of want to stick to that principle. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a fine day, all you people listening who are not here in this living room with me where there's nobody, not even a cat. Bye.